Alright, the first round that we're going to do is a darning stitch, and all it is weaving under and over, under and over. But it's the number of strands that you have to pay attention to that your pattern is calling for. I haven't done very many, but some of them just say darning the center, so it doesn't tell you whether to go through 2 strands at a time or not. In ours, if it specifically says double darning, then you're going to go under 2, over 2, meaning I'm going to pass my needle under 2 and over 2. So since we're doing an even number of stitches here, when I get to the last one, my needle should be passing over. So if I get to the end and I notice that my needle is going under, it means I missed a stitch somewhere, and I do that really often. Number one, I haven't done this a whole lot, and sometimes I'm daydreaming, so you have to be careful at the first not to miss any. So I mean, it's not a big deal, but your count is not going to come out right when you get ready to start the next row. So it's real easy to rip out the weaving. You just unthread your needle and then you just kind of pull the stitches out. So it's not that bad. Alright, so I like to start with an under, and as you can see, this is where I ended. So this string completes the pair that belongs on that holding stitch. So every holding stitch around the edge is going to have a pair of ends on it, and they are single strands. They are not, we don't count this as one unless the pattern tells you to. So I like to try to straighten them up as I go, because since this is all twisted anyway, they kind of want to flip, and then when we start the weaving, then they start misbehaving, and then as you get farther on in the pattern, they start laying where they need to go. So I just keep an eye on that. So I'm pulling that snug all the way across from A to C, because I ended up on A on my loom, so I need to go straight across to the other side. And I'm going to go under the one that's marked C, because that's directly under. So I'm going to start with an under, and I'm going to go under, over. And I like to look down here, and that way you don't miss them, instead of trying to do it up here. So go under, over, and so on, all the way around. And again, we're going under 2, over 2. So it's under a pair, over a pair, under a pair. So and then you pull it up tight, and I've got these concentric circles, grooves in there that kind of helps you to eyeball it and make sure everything's kind of centered. You can kind of move the bundle more toward the center if your circle is not centralized. This pattern is a symmetrical pattern, so you don't want your circle drifting off center. So I'm going to turn my loom, and if I don't know where I left off, I just kind of pull on that, and the pair that wiggles, I know that that's the one that I just went under. So the next one's going to be over. So hopefully when I get to the other side, I won't have missed any. So I'm just going to pull that up snug to where it's neat. You're really not going to be able to see your stitches on this side very well, because they're going to start getting buried in that bundle. But what it's doing is tying that all together in the middle, so it holds the lace together. And I didn't intend on showing you the whole round because I want the videos short, but I'm going to try to do this quickly. Instead of pausing the video, I can fast forward if I need to. So I'm just pulling that up snug. So my circle looks like it's staying pretty close to the middle. I'm getting close to the end. So this one is, that twist is bothering me. Alright, So this one's an over, under, under, and my last one my needle should go over. All right, so I did good. So to make these stitches interlace, we can't just go under again because the last stitch is under there. So all we would be doing would be stacking up stitches on top of each other underneath these things. So when I start on the first one again, this time I'm going to go over. But that's going to mean that this one is an over and then this one's going to be an over, but that doesn't matter. All we want to do is alternate on the second round, and that's going to cinch this middle up. Usually they recommend about 3, but for this pattern I want plenty of room to stitch in here, and 2 is sufficient. And we're also going to add a row of knots. So just again, it all depends on your design. You can kind of put in this web whatever you want to put. It's a blank canvas. So if you don't like the stitches they called for, then change it to something you like. All right, so there's my over, and then I'm going to start over on I'm going to do an over on this one, and then I'm going to start under on the second one. And then I'm going to go all the way around, do exactly what I did the first round. All right, I'm coming to the end, and I'm hoping that I land in the right place. But if I didn't, I can show you how to undo. So that's an over and an under. So this time I was supposed to end with my needle going under the last one, so my round is good. It means that I probably didn't make any mistakes. And my circle in the middle looks like it's staying pretty close to the center, so it looks like I want it to. So we're ready to start learning how to do the knot stitch. The next stitch we're learning is the knot stitch, and my camera quit on me when I was explaining that when you finish a round, you need to go ahead and cross over to where you started, so that it doesn't show on the darning, but let me find one where I made a mistake. At the end of my last round on my scallop here, I did not cross over to close the gap. So you're going to have a gap at the end of every round where your first one started and then it ended. So you're going to have to cross over with a little bar and secure it to where you started so that you can close the round or close the gap. And it's really hard to see on the loom. You can look at it and say, oh, that looks beautiful, let me take it off of the loom. And you'll have something that screams at you like that one, and it really bugged me. And I could go back and fix it, but I was kind of learning on that one. So anyway, learn from my mistakes. So to make the knot, I usually hold this up in my hand, but I'm going to try to do it with it laying flat so that you can see. There's several ways. Some people just kind of cross their yarn over and then they make the knot all in one big swoop. So whatever is comfortable for you, I'm just going to show you what works for me. So in our pattern, we are going to be making a knot and bundling these two pairs together. So you can bundle in any way that you want. So on this small medallion, I first bundled with this first row of knots, just took a pair of them and put them together. And then on the next row where you make this little star point, I bundled the opposite pairs. I split the pairs. And then so on and so forth. You can keep going. If you bundle two sections in at a time, bundling the same pair, you'll end up with rectangles instead of little star points. So it's whatever you want your design to be. Let's see if I can find one that's like that. On this one I have the star points, and then I bundled the alternate pairs to get the star points, and then I bundled again the same pair that I bundled before, and I got these little rectangles going around. So you can bundle any number of threads together that you want, but again, for this pattern we're going to do 4. So I'm going to make sure this thread is down, I'm going to start with C so I'll know where I am, and pass my needle under both those pairs because I want to bundle 4 strands together, and I want to make sure that's not twisted because it'll cause me problems for the rest of the project. I'm going under 4 strands, and I like to slide my needle up. It's not 100% necessary to slide it up to where your knot's going to be, but for this example I'm just going to kind of leave it right there. Then I'm going to take this thread that I'm holding here, and you see I need to pull that tight up against where it came out at because it's going to leave a little kink there, a little curly knot if you don't pull it tight. So sometimes I'll use this thread and I'll pull my needle up where I want it to go, and that way I've released any little kinks that are in this thread right here. Then I take that same thread and I wrap it up and over the top of the needle, and then I pull it back down tight so it's wrapped around the needle. And then I pull my needle through and I keep my finger on there, and again usually I'm holding this in my hand, so hopefully you can see what I'm doing. So at the last minute I'll let go of the finger that I was holding there, and if you pull your knot straight up slowly it'll land where you want it to most of the time. They're easy to undo especially with this number 10 crochet cotton. If you were using a thinner thread, the knots would be hard to undo, but you can still kind of nudge that knot where you want it. So let's do another one. I'm going to make sure this yarn is out of the way. I want my needle going over that strand right there. Sometimes I just hold it in my hand. This is where I left off. Go under the next 4 strands, slide my needle close to where I want it to go, or I can pull this thread and pull my needle up there and then pull that around the top of the needle, pull the needle through. This the next time I'm going to hold it in my hand. So I'm going to let go of that and pull straight up. And if it looks like it's getting messy over here, don't obsess about it because usually the knot will land where it's supposed to. But since I'm doing this in an awkward position, I don't like the look of that right there. So I can just pull on that, straighten it out, poke my needle in there, and pull the knot down, and then wiggle my needle to get the knot where I want it. Doesn't take a long time to do that, so you may find the need to do that. So one more time, I'm going to do this with this holding in my hand, and you want the gap between each knot to be equal. Right here they're close together so it doesn't really show, but when you get your knots out here you want these bars to be the same that are running between the knots. Let's see if I can show you one. These right here on the wrong side. These bars can get quite messy. So if you need to undo a knot, you can stick your needle between where that bar is and just wiggle it out, and this knot will slide down, and then you can get your needle in there and wiggle the knot free. It comes loose pretty easily. I might get a chance to show you that if I mess up. Okay, normally I'm holding this close to my face, so I'm going to try to stay in the camera. So I've got this thread down and out of the way. Sometimes I hold it with my thumb, and I stick my needle under the next 4 strands, making sure they're lying flat. And then I pull this thread tight so I get rid of any kinks right there, wrap it over the top of my needle and around. I'm really hoping that that showed. I think I was out of the camera. And sometimes you still have a wiggle room where you can wiggle it into place. You'll get your own technique going, getting how you like to do it and how it works best for you to get your knots to land where they need to. This first round is really hard. It was hard for me when I was learning. It's like my knots never landed where they wanted, but you'll get better at it. I'm still practicing, so I'm going to stop talking and put this under 4 strands, making sure I'm on top of this thread, wrap my needle, And my dog is going crazy right now. And then pull my needle through. So you'll get to see this knot again on the next round. And you'll be using the knot quite a bit, so you'll get plenty of practice on this one. I'm going to continue around till I get back to the beginning, and then I'll show you how to close the round. Alright, I just finished my last knot, and I know you can see that little gap right there. So I need to close it. So there's several ways that I can do it. I can actually just run my needle through the last knot. Sometimes that will loosen up that knot, so I don't always do it that way. Most of the time they recommend you just doing another Teneriffe lace knot. So this time I'm just going to grab 2 strands just to make a tiny knot, just to close that gap and create a bar between the knots. So I'm wrapping my needle and pulling that through. And so now I've created a bar that is continuous around the entire loom.